Hello guys, today I talk about law number 15, crush your enemy totally. First of all, judgment. All great leaders since must have known that a favorable enemy must be crushed completely. If one ember is left alight, no matter how timely it soldiers, a fire will eventually break out. More is lost through stopping halfway than through total annihilation. The enemy will recover and will seek revenge. Crush him not only in body but in spirit. Transgression of the law. No rivalry between leaders is more celebrated in Chinese history than the struggle between Xiang Yu and Liu Peng. These two generals began their careers as a friend, fighting on the same side. Xiang Yu come from the nobility, large and powerful, given to bouts of violence and temper, a bit, a bit dull-witted. He was yet a mighty warrior who always fought at the lead of his troops. Liu Peng come from peasant stock. He had never been much of a soldier and preferred women and wine to fighting. In fact, he was something of a scoundrel, but he was wily and he had the ability to recognize the best strategists, keep them as advisor, and listen to their advice. He had risen in the army through these strengths. In 208 BC, the king of Zhou sent two massive armies to conquer the powerful kingdom of Qin. One army went north under the generalship of Song Yi with Iseng Yu second in command. The other, led by Liu Peng, headed straight toward Qin. The target was the kingdom's splendid capital. Hesen Yang and Hsing Yu, ever violent and impatient, could not stand the idea that Liu Peng would get to Hsen Yang first. They perhaps would assume command of the entire army. At one point on the northern front, Xiang's commander Song Yi hesitated in sending his troop into battle. Furious, Xiang entered Song Yi's tent, proclaimed him a traitor, cut off his head, and assumed sole command of the army. Without waiting for orders, he left the northern front and marched directly on Hseng. He felt certain he was the better soldier and general than Liu, but to his utter astonishment, his rival, leading a smaller, swifter army, managed to reach Hsen first. Hseng had an advisor, Fan Zheng, who warned him. This village headman used to be great only for riches and women, but since entering the capital he has not been led straight by wealth, wine or sex. That show he is aiming high. Fan Zheng urged Hsing to kill his rival before it was too late. He told the general to invite the wealthy peasant to a banquet at their camp outside Hsen, and in the midst of a celebratory sword dance, to have his head cut off. The invitation was sent. Liu fell for the trap and come to banquet, but Hsing hesitated in ordering the sword dance, and by the time he gave the signal, Liu had sensed a trap and managed to escape. They carried Fan Zheng in discharge, Seeing that Hastings had botched the plot, one cannot plan with a simpleton. Liu Peng will steal your empire yet and make us all his prisoners. Realizing his mistake, Hastings hurriedly marched on Hastings, this time determined to hack off his rival's head. Liu was never one to fight when the odds were against him, and he abandoned the city. Hastings captured Yang, murdered the young prince of Qin, and burned the city to the ground. Liu was now Hastings' bitter enemy, and he pursued him for many months, finally cornering him in a walled city. Lacking food, his army in disarray, Liu sued for peace. Again Fan Sang warned Hastings, crush him now. If you let him go again, you will be sorry later. But Hastings decided to be merciful. He wanted to bring Liu back to Chu alive and to force his former friend to acknowledge him as a master, but Fan proved right. Liu managed to use the negotiations for his surrender as a distraction. He escaped with a small army. Hastings, amazed that he had yet again let his rival slip away, once more set out after Liu, this time with such ferocity that he seemed to have lost his mind. At one point, having captured Liu's father in battle, Hastings stood the old man up during the fighting and yelled to Liu across the line of troops, "Surrender now, or I shall boil your father alive." Liu calmly answered, "But we are sworn brothers, so my father is your father also. If you insist on boiling your own father, send me a bowl of the soup." Hissing backed down, and the struggle continued. A few weeks later, in the thick of the hunt, Hissing scattered his forces unwisely, and in a surprise attack, Liu was able to surround his main garrison. For the first time, the tables were turned. Now it was Hastings who sued for the peace. Liu's top advisor urged him to destroy Hastings, crush his army, show on mercy. To let him go would be like rearing a tiger. It will devour you later, the advisor said. Liu agreed. Making a false treaty, he lured Hastings into relaxing his defense. He slaughtered almost all of his army. Hastings managed to escape alone and on foot, knowing that Liu had put a bounty on his head. He came upon a small group of his own retreating soldiers and carried out, I hear Liu Peng has offered 1,000 pieces of gold and a fifth of 10,000 families for my head. Let me do you a favor." Then he slit his own throat and died. Interpretation: Hastings, who had proven his ruthlessness on many an occasion, he rarely hesitated in doing away with a rival if it served his purpose. But with Liu Peng he acted differently. He respected his rival and did not want to defeat him through deception. He wanted to prove his superiority on the battlefield, even to force the clever Liu to surrender and to serve him. Every time he had his rival in his hands, something made him hesitate. A fatal sympathy with a respect for the man who, after all, had once been a friend and comrade in arms, but the moment having made it clear that he intended to do away with you, yet failed to accomplish it, he sealed his own doom. You would not suffer the same hesitation once the table were turned. This is the fate that faces all of us when they sympathize with our enemies, when pity or the hope of reconciliation make us pull back from doing away with them. We only strengthen their fear and hatred of us. We have beaten them and they are humiliated. Yet we nurture these resentful vipers who will one day kill us. Power cannot be dealt with this way. It must be exterminated, crushed, and denied the chance to return to haunt us. This, this is all the truer with a former friend who has become an enemy. The law governing fatal antagonism reads, reconciliation is out of the question. Only one side can win, and it must win totally. Liu Peng learned this lesson well. After defeating Husing, Yu, the son of the farmer, went on to become supreme commander of the armies of Chu, crushing his next rival, the king of Chu, his own former leader. He crowned himself emperor, defeated everyone in his path, and went down in history as one of the greatest rulers of China. The immortal Han Kotsu, founder of the Han dynasty. Observance of the law. Hu Chiao born in AD 625, was the daughter of Duque, and as a beautiful young woman of many charms, she was accordingly attached to the harem of Emperor Taizong. The imperial harem was a dangerous place, full of young concubines vying to become the emperor's favorite, whose beauty and forceful character quickly won her this battle. But knowing that an emperor, like other powerful men, is a creature of whim, and that she could easily be replaced, she kept her eye on the future. Who managed to seduce the emperor's dissolute son, Cao Tsung, on the only possible occasion when she could find him alone, while he was relieving himself at the royal urinal. Even so, when the emperor died and Cao Tsung took over the throne, she still suffered the fate to which all wives and concubines of a deceased emperor were bound by tradition and law. Her head shaven, she entered a convent for what was supposed to be the rest of her life. For 7 years, Wu schemed to escape by communicating in secret with the new emperor and by befriending his wife, the empress. She managed to get a highly unusual royal edict allowing her to return to the palace and to the royal harem. Once there, she found on the empress whilst sleeping with the emperor. The empress did not discourage this. She had yet to provide the emperor with an heir. Her position was vulnerable and Wu was valuable ally. In 654, Wu Chao gave birth to a child. One day the empress came to visit, and as soon as she had left, Wu some thread the newborn her own baby. When the murder was discovered, suspicion immediately fell on the empress, who had been on the scene moment earlier and whose jealous nature was known by all. This was precisely Wu's plan. Shortly thereafter, Shortly thereafter, the empress was charged with murder and executed. Hu Chao was crowned empress in her place. Her new husband, addicted to his life of pleasure, gladly gave up the reins of government to Wu Chao, who was from then on known as Empress Wu. Although now in a position of great power, Wu hardly felt secure. There were enemies everywhere. She could not let down her guard for one moment. Indeed, when she was 41, she began to fear that her beautiful young niece was becoming the emperor's favorite. She poisoned the woman with a clay mixed into her food. In 1675, her her own son, touted as the heir apparent, was poisoned as well. The next eldest son, alleged, but now the crown prince was exiled a little later on trumped up charges, and when the emperor died in 683, who managed to have the son after that declared unfit for the throne. All this meant that it was her youngest, most influential son who finally became emperor. In this way, the continued to rule. Over the next 5 years, there were innumerable plague coups. All of them failed, and all of the conspirators were executed. By 688, there was no one left to challenge who she proclaimed herself a divine descendant of Buddha, and in 690 her wishes were finally granted. She was named Holy and Divine Emperor of China, who became emperor because there was literally nobody left from the previous Tang dynasty, and so she ruled unchallenged for over a decade of relative peace. In 705, at the age of 80, she was forced to educated interpretation. All who knew Empress Wu remarked on her energy and intelligence. At the time, there was no glory available for an ambitious woman beyond a few years in the imperial harem, then a lifetime veiled up in a convent. In Wu's gradual but remarkable rise to the top, she was never nervous. She knew that any hesitation, any momentary weakness would spell her end. It every time she got rid of her rival, a new one appeared. The solution was simple. She had to crush them all or be killed herself. Other emperors before her had followed the same path of the top, but Wu, who as a woman had next to no chance to gain power, had to be more ruthless still. Empress was 40-year. Reign was one of the longest in Chinese history. Although the story of her bloody rise to power is well known, in China she is considered one of the period's most able and effective rulers. Keys to power. It is no accident that the two stories illustrating his law come from China. Chinese history abounds with examples of enemies who were left alive and returned to hunt to lineage. Crush the enemy is a key strategic tent of Sun Tzu, the 4th century BC. Other, the art of war. The idea is simple. Your enemies wish you all. There is nothing they want more than to eliminate you. If in your struggles with them you stop halfway, or even three quarters of the way, out of mercy or hope of reconciliation, you only make them more determined, more impenitent, and they will someday take revenge. They may act friendly for the time being, but this is only because you have defeated them. They have no choice but to bide their time. The solution: have no mercy, crush your enemies as totally as they would crush you. Ultimately, the only peace and security you can hope for from your enemies is their disappearance. Mao Zedong, a devoted reader of Sun Tzu and of Chinese history generally, knew the importance of this law. In 1934, the communist leader and some 75,000 poorly equipped soldiers fled into the desolate mountains of western China to escape Chiang Kai-shek's much larger army in what has since been called the Long March. Qing was determined to eliminate every last communist, and by a few years later Mao had less than 10,000 soldiers left by 1937. In fact, when China was invaded by Japan, Chiang calculated that the communists were no longer a threat. He chose to give up the cash and concentrate on the Japanese. 10 years later, the communists had recovered enough to rout Chiang's army. Chiang had forgotten the ancient wisdom of crushing the enemy. Mao had not. Chiang was pushed until he and his entire army fell to the island of Taiwan. Nothing remains of his regime in mainland China to this day. The wisdom behind crushing the enemy is as ancient as the Bible's. Its first practitioner may have been Moses, who learned it from God himself when he parted the Red Sea for the Jews. Then he let the water flow back over the pursuing Egyptians so that so much as one of them remained. When Moses returned from the Mount Sinai with the 10 commandments and found his people worshipping the golden calf, he had every last offender slaughtered, and just before he died, he told his followers, finally about to enter the promised land, that when they had defeated the tribes of Canaan, they should utterly destroy them, make no covenant with them, and show no mercy to them. The goal of total victory is an axiom of modern warfare, and was conditioned as such by Karl von Clausewitz, the premier philosopher of war, analyzing the campaigns Napoleon brought, who do claim that direct annihilation of the enemy's force must always be diminution consideration. Once a major victory is achieved, there must be no talk of rest, of breathing space, but only of the pursuit, going for the enemy again, seizing his capital, attacking his rivers, and anything else that might give his country aid and comfort. The reason for after this is that after war come negotiation and the division of territory. If you have only won a partial victory, you will inevitably lose in negotiation what you have gained by war. The solution is simple. The solution is simple. Allow your enemies no option. Annihilate them and their territory is yours to crave. The goal of power is to control your enemies completely, to make them obey your will. You cannot afford to go halfway. If they have no options, they will be forced to do your binding. This law has applications far beyond the battlefield. Negotiation is the industrious viper that will eat away at your victory. So give your enemies nothing to negotiate, no hope, no room to maneuver. They are crushed, and that is that. Realize this. In your struggle for power, you will stir up rivalries and create enemies. There will be people you cannot win over, who will remain your enemies no matter what. But whatever wound you inflicted on them, deliberately or not, do not take their hate personally. Just recognize that there is no possibility of peace between you, especially as long as you stay in power. If you let them stick around, they will seek revenge as certainly as night follows day. The wait for them to show their cards is just silly. As Empress Wu understood by then, it it will be too late. Be realistic. With an enemy like this around, you will never be secure. Remember the lesson of history and the wisdom of Moose, and now never go halfway. It is not, of course, a question of murder. It is a question of banishment, sufficiently weakened and then exiled from your court forever. Your enemies are rendered harmless. They have no hope of recovering, insinuating themselves and hurting you. And if they cannot be banished, at least understand that they are plotting against you, and pay no heed to whatever friendliness they figure. Your only weapon in such a situation is your own awareness. If you cannot banish them immediately, then plot for the best time to act. Image: a viper crushed beneath your foot but left alive will rear up and bite you with a double dose of venom. An enemy that is left around is like a half-dead viper that you nurse back to health. Time makes the venom grow stronger. Authority: for it must be noted that men must either be crushed or else annihilated. They will revenge themselves for small injuries, but cannot do so for great ones. The injury, therefore, that we do to a man must be such that we need not fear his weakness. Reversal: this law should very rarely be ignored, but it does sometimes happen that it is better to let your enemies destroy themselves. If such a thing is possible, then to make them suffer by your hand. In warfare, for example, a good general knows that If he attacks an army when it is cornered, its soldier will fight much more fiercely. It is sometimes better than to leave them and escape route, a way out. As they retreat, they wear themselves out and are ultimately more demoralized, sorry, demoralized by the retreat than by any defeat they might inflict on the battlefield. Then you have someone on the ropes, then, but only when you are sure they have no chance of recovery. You might let them hang themselves, let them be the agents of their own destruction. The result will be the same, and you won't feel half as bad. Finally, sometimes by crushing an enemy, you embitter them so much that they spend years and years plotting revenge. The Treaty of Versailles had such an effect on the Germans. Some would argue that in the in long run, it would be better to show some legacy. The problem is your licensing involves another risk. It may embolden the enemy, which still harbors a grudge, but now has some rooms to operate. It is almost always wiser to crush your enemy if they plot revenge years later. Do not let your guard down, but simply crush them again. So guys, this is law number is 50. Crush your enemy totally. Go on next law. It will be tomorrow. Thank you.